Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're going to be switching gears now to Gaza as mounting international pressure grows on Israeli quote-unquote leadership, especially as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to essentially fully open the Rafah crossing. The territory's very, very vital gateway for humanitarian aid and movement of goods and services between the rest of the world and Gaza, essentially. And this is following developments in the long running of Israel's war on Gaza and the conflict. Critics are saying that the truce framework and this newly promoted Gaza peace boards are struggling to translate ceasefire pledges into tangible relief for civilians. This is amid continued restrictions and political wrangling over Rafah status. And today we'll be speaking to Professor Jeff Halper, co-founder and director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. He's a long-standing human rights activist who's been opposing occupation and advocating structural solutions to the war on Gaza. And he's joining us via our virtual platform. Prof, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Good. Thanks for having me again.
And I think we'll jump right into it. Just your quick analysis of the quote-unquote truce and ceasefire that we've been seeing. A lot of its terms and conditions have not been adhered to by Israel. What do you make of where we currently find ourselves and the establishment of this peace board that Trump is so happily and proud to flaunt to the rest of the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, the peace board is a real danger, of course, to the international system because it's meant to really replace the UN. And Trump has actually said that we're just starting with Gaza, but the possibilities are endless in terms of where these boards of peace that are chaired by Trump as the lifelong CEO, of course, can go. Look, with Gaza, I think we have to think of three things. There are three different parties involved here, each one that has its own interests and basically its own programs, unrelated and sometimes in conflict with the others. Really quickly, the first one, of course, is Trump. Trump sees Gaza as a real estate deal, of course. And if you look at the map that Jared Kushner just this last week presented, you know, it's a real estate deal in which it's based around tourism, high-rise hotels, restaurants, a seafront. I mean, they've said for many years that this is a seafront almost like no other on the Mediterranean. And so if you look at the map, first of all, it's in blocks. So it gives Israel easy access militarily to Gaza. I mean, it locks Palestinians into blocks of these square types of settlements, but it also isolates them from the sea. So Trump's motivation here is to create is money, to create a huge real estate effort, and you can see the way the Board of Peace is based. Now the second partner is Netanyahu and Israel. Now they don't want to govern Gaza, so here they're in kind of a bind because on the one hand it's a good idea to have a board of peace and have the international community kind of govern Gaza. But the problem is that Israel still wants military control, first of all. And second, Israel does not want to empower the Palestinians. You see, the danger of this technological committee, this technocratic committee that's being set up to run the day-by-day affairs of Gaza, that's composed of Palestinians, is a threat to Israel because if they do well and if they get international credibility, that technocratic committee could turn into a governing committee. And that, of course, would strengthen the Palestinian Authority. So they have all the interest in keeping Turkey, Qatar, and the Palestinians minimized as a presence and not to have any competition to their own control over Gaza. And then the third, really quickly, the third, of course, party are the Palestinians. And the Palestinians are completely locked out of this whole process. No one's talked to them. Nobody's advised with them except picking, and Trump has picked the technocrats that are going to rule Gaza. And it's not political. There's no political horizon. I mean, the only plan of this is to build a tourist industry real estate site for Jared Kushner. Nothing about Palestinian self-determination, nothing about who's going to rule Gaza politically, nothing about, the political horizon of what's going to happen to the Palestinians in general. And Gaza's disconnected to the West Bank. So it's really a mess because you've got these three interests all pulling in different directions, and the weakest one is the Palestinians.
And I think that's the most concerning aspect and part of it. This peace board, and I want to stay on it. Its charter appears to frame that it's not just a Gaza focused body, as you mentioned, but a broader conflict resolution organization. What do you make of that? Do you think this mission is too expansive, or even feasible, or maybe just it's a almost a distraction factor from Gaza's urgent needs and what we need to be focusing on at this current moment? You spoke about it ultimately being a replacement of the UN, and I think that's a very, very important aspect to also note and expand a bit on.
Right. We also have to be careful that Gaza isn't disconnected from the rest of Palestine and from what's happening, because that's always been Israel's interest, to keep military control of Gaza, but to prevent Gaza from being a springboard, for a larger peace process that would then involve the West Bank, Israel, and so I think, and Trump is with Israel in this. Of course, what's happening with Gaza is connected to the normalization process going on with Saudi Arabia, the Abraham Accords, and so again, it's disconnected from the Palestinians, because the normalization process is between the different states. So you have that. So basically, what you have is kind of a situation in which you have this international board, of which Trump is the CEO, that's running Gaza with no political horizon. And in other words, it's there, and it could run Gaza forever. I mean, Trump has appointed himself the lifelong CEO of this board, and so the role of the Palestinians is in this technocratic committee to run the everyday, run health, municipal services, oversee the reconstruction. That'll be all planned by Jared Kushner, of course, paid for, I guess, by the Arab countries. So there's an Arab complicity in this, but at the same time, its governance would be the governance of non-Palestinians. So it's really, in a sense, the Palestinians become the ones that run the everyday affairs and police. So the security thing becomes a Palestinian. Now, Israel's very concerned that the Palestinian police don't become strong enough that they kind of replace Hamas. Now, Hamas is also a wild card because, again, this whole conception is missing the political. Hamas is being treated as a terrorist organization that has to be disarmed, right? Demilitarized, de-radicalized, as they say. And somehow then the people of Hamas they simply become a part of this Trump-run little entity. But Hamas is a resistance organization. Hamas is resisting Israeli occupation, colonization, of course. And so the very idea of dismantling Hamas and giving arms to a collaborationist, Palestinian Authority-based technocratic committee is also colonial, because it leaves the Palestinians with no political horizon. Israeli control remains intact. It becomes a tourist place in which the Palestinian residents simply become employees of the Trump-based hotels and tourist industry, run by Palestinians so that it looks okay, but Palestinians that have no authority except for technocratic kinds of responsibilities. So it's really a completely anti-political, anti-Palestinian plan, basically to create a huge real estate property for the Trump organization on the Mediterranean.
Mm. I want to shift focus now to questions around Rafah and the quote unquote limited reopening. It was dominating the headlines yesterday. Israel came out, said Rafah will only reopen once its operation to locate the last hostages remains is exhausted. From your perspective, is this a legitimate security condition, or maybe a political delaying tactic or of some sort? What do you make of that kind of reasoning and wording around the opening of Rafah?
Well, first of all, the last body was located
Mm,
and returned to Israel yesterday. So that's over. Now the hostage issue is done. It can't be used by Netanyahu as a delaying tactic. That's finished. Now, with Rafah, the idea, of course, of Rafah is that that's the main transition point between Egypt and the wider world and Gaza, not just for humanitarian aid, but also for people. Can Gazans leave Gaza now? Can people, if it's going to be reconstructed, can Gazans that have left come back to Gaza to reestablish their lives? That's the meaning of Rafah, and of course, Israel does not want to give up control, and I think this is really key. Israel does not want to govern Gaza. It's very
mm,
happy that Trump and the technocrats are doing that, but Israel does not want in any way to strengthen this idea that there's some Palestinian autonomy, not to mention independence. So it's always, always, always going to insist on having military control. Maybe behind the scenes, but not the military on the ground necessarily, but having military control. And Rafah is a perfect example because
mm,
there'll be gates, between Rafah, between Gaza and Egypt, but Israel's going to have a presence, a kind of another gate, an electronic gate, in which all the humanitarian aid coming in, people leaving, the entire control will still be in the hands of Israel, even if Israel is behind the scenes and invisible. You see, and those are the things we really have to. It's very hard to track them, but we have to really be aware of. Are we going to get to a point, at least if it's not political yet, at least where the Palestinians do have a meaningful role in running the lives of Gaza? That's right, and of having some control of people coming back and forth, supplies to rebuild Gaza. Will they have any control at all, or will it all be controlled by the Trump organization under the guise
mm,
of the Board of Peace and Israel? So, are we talking about a continued occupation and control of Israel and suppression of anything political that the whole revolt of Gaza in the last 2 years has been all about? Or is this just another way of controlling the Palestinians? That's really the question.
mm, mm. Well, there you have it, Professor Jeff Halper. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Would have loved to continue the conversation, but hope we chat again soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Go, Professor Jeff Halper, coming to us live from Alkut. And speaking on very important elements of this quote unquote ceasefire that we've been seeing, this board of peace and what they want to see happen in Gaza, essentially, the governance of Gaza and what that will look like in the coming future. And also the very, very important point, the fact that Rafah essentially could be opened. This considering the fact that the last of the hostages has essentially been found and evacuated or repatriated back to Israel. So there's essentially no excuse at this current moment for Rafah crossing to fully reopen and to have full operation so that. Aid, most importantly, can start flowing out of Gaza, and there could be people moving in and out of Gaza in Egypt, and life can return to some normalcy. So it's going to be a really, really interesting time, especially looking at this peace board that has been established by Donald Trump and some of the characters that are a part of it. So, yeah. really, really interesting year ahead. But I think what's important for us at this point is to continue talking about Gaza, continue talking about Palestine, because it is not done. It is not finished. There's still so much more from this story, so much chapters that are going to be unfolding, and we'll be there as Salam Media to give you the latest. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.